Hi, my name is Nantenaina Rakotomalala. I'm a Malagasy researcher from the Royal Botany Gardens in Madagascar, working mainly on grasses and grasslands. Today, I'm happy to share with you our research project on Digitaria grasses and their botanical taxonomy with the aim of having a positive impact on the local agriculture. This is a multidisciplinary project that involves international researchers and collaborators to whom I want to say thank you already. Usually grasses are seen as weeds, tricky to identify and less attractive compared to other plants like orchids, which is understandable, but beside of this, most of the Malagasy grass type specimens are held in Paris herbarium, which makes their study more difficult and less motivating for local researchers. Thankfully, with the RBGQ, grass science has really improved since 2011. New Malagasy grass specialists were formed and many publications have been released, including an atlas and an identification guide to the genre. So far, we know that more than 500 grass species occur in Madagascar and more than 40% are endemic. In this project, we aim to meet the scientific need, which is to further document the diversity of grasses in Madagascar with the economic ones, which is to improve agricultural production. In other words, the aim is to help Malagasy smallholders to distinguish problematic weeds from useful forages and endemics, and to help them use this knowledge to improve their agricultural capacity. We will carry out a taxonomic review of Digitaria, ethnobotanical studies of weedy grasses and forages, and a phylogenetic analysis of their evolution. Why we choose Digitaria, commonly known as fingergrass for their finger-like inflorescence. Digitaria includes both problematic weeds and beneficial forages. For example, Digitaria piscinica, a common noxious weed in Africa. It can multiply very rapidly and develop dense, tangled rhizomes that smother crops and reduce production. Another example is Digitaria ciliaris, which is also a weed, but could also be a very good forage, even better than any other grass if properly managed. In Madagascar, which is a developing country and where agriculture is vital for the economy, we know that there are Digitaria, but we don't know how many or which species, or they weeds, forage, or both. So we think that if we can find and disseminate this information, farmers will be able to identify the best methods of weed control and to select best forage later on. In order to gather fresh collections and talk directly with farmers, we made field trips in 4 sites in the highlands of Madagascar. We collected 400 specimens, including Digitaria, and conducted 111 interviews to identify the herbs that grow crops, those that farmers consider as weeds, and to understand how farmers select forages and how they name and distinguish species between them. For the morphological analysis, we consulted Digitaria specimens available at the Herbaria of Madagascar, Paris, and Kew, in order to note the important characters that differentiate the species from one another and to write the updated description of each species. For the molecular identification, online sequences were downloaded and analyzed to delimit species clusters and assess their genetic variability. We will try to understand the evolutionary history, traits, and weediness in Digitaria, and to understand how weedy species are geographically dispersed and genetically entangled with forage and crop grasses. As first result, the taxonomic revision of Digitaria has been completed. We can now confirm that 30 species of Digitaria are present in Madagascar, including a new species that we found from old unidentified specimens at Paris Herbarium. We don't have the noxious weed Digitaria piscinica that I mentioned earlier, but we do have many others like Digitaria ternata, which was recorded for the first time in Madagascar through this research. We also recorded Digitaria zeori for the first time in Madagascar, which is a name already synonymized with Digitaria velutina, but which we wish to reincarnate. About the endemicity, 8 species are endemic to the island, including this tiny plant on the screen, Digitaria canadensis, that measures only up to 4 centimeters tall and forms natural and beautiful lawn on high altitudes. An identification key of species has been also developed, in which the number of spikelet in cluster on the racemes is the main feature used to separate species between them. This taxonomic work will be designed as a monograph for Digitaria in Madagascar. For the ethnobotanical studies, 88 species of grass were mentioned by farmers to have relationship with their economic activities, and 11 of them are Digitaria. As general perception, grasses are either negative or positive. Negative when they grow and evade crop, compete for nutrients and make the soil sterile and solid. Positive when the plant contributes to the soil fertility and conserve their quality between harvesting and planting seasons. For Digitaria, farmers tend to mix up species between them using a general naming and identification. Mainly, they rely on the behavior of the plant, the color, or uses to identify the species. Here, the creeping and rhizomatous grass are called fanducharan, meaning small plant with entangled habit. The ones that tend to have dark red inflorescence are called ahimenakil, meaning red herb. Those eaten by this bird, fudia, are called ahipud, meaning herb of food. Farmers confirm that all the 11 Digitarias are weeds, but all of them are used to feed cattle as well. For the weeds, farmers mention that the fanducharan grass are the most weedy, but Digitaria humbertii is the most problematic. It actually has similar turf-forming underground rhizomes, like Digitaria piscinica, and could grow in any type of local crop yield. In the 4 sites we did field trips. For the forages, all of them are eaten by cattle as fodder, but species with tender stems such as Digitaria ciliaris, sanguinalis, and horizontalis are more preferred by cattle and so grazed in the nature. For the molecular analysis, we constate that Digitaria is not monophyletic so far, but 2 clades could be distinguished, and there is the pinnate clade, which is the ancestral form, representing species having spikelets in group of 2 on the racemes, and the ternate clade that oppositely includes species having spikelet in group of 3 or more on the racemes. This is partially in agreement with the morphology-based classifications. For the invasive species, they appear independently toward clades and appear several times. Most of them belong to the pinnate clades, but so far no phylogenetical signal of weedy function was observed. To put the outputs into actions, the new taxonomic data on Digitaria species were compared and used to update the data on weeds and forages held by FOFIFA, which is a National Center for Applied Research on Rural Development, on Wikitrop, and on Wikitrop, which is weed identification and knowledge in the tropical and Mediterranean areas website, to ensure agreement on species identity, so that this data on nutrition and control methods are linked to the correct species names. Apart from that, we are also designing an illustrated book that will serve as a tool for non-specialists, farmers, and agronomists to help them recognize species, choose weed control methods, and select forage grasses for livestock farming. We intend to include around 350 species of common grasses in the book, including Digitaria species, where everything about the species will be represented, like the vernacular names, morphological description, origin, phenology, woodiness, utility, etc. The book will be written in 2 languages by authors from 15 institutions, including ministries, universities, and NGOs working in the field of agriculture in Madagascar. To generalize and facilitate the comprehension of each describing element, like what we mean with ligule or phenology, for examples, icons will be used. On the right, there is a beautiful draft of how species will be represented at its best in the book. We're looking for publishing this book next year and will share copies as many as possible. That's all about my presentation. I want to thank the Bentham-Moxon Trust and the Botany Conference organizers that granted me this opportunity. It was an honor to present at this conference and be representing Madagascar. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask. I'm such a paycheck.